Hi Everett, Miss Graham here from 6th grade nonfiction studies. I want to tell you about a book that I read called The Boys in the Boat. It is by Daniel James Brown, and it is narrative nonfiction, and it has a strong biography element because it's mostly the story of a man named Joe Rance who when he was a boy had a lot of trouble in his family and his upbringing. He grew up at a time when his family didn't have much money, and his mother died when he was young, and he spent a lot of his young childhood and basically when he was your age kind of trying to find his way in the world. And what he eventually found his way to was college and a sport that he loved, that was rowing. And he eventually made the Olympic rowing team. And the most probably exciting thing about the book is that it's the story of the U.S. Olympic rowing team going to the 1936 Olympics in Germany when Adolf Hitler was in charge. And the story of the triumph of that boat, that American boat in those Olympics. I want to read you something from the book that's about how the author met Joe Rance. This book is a true story. It was born on a cold, drizzly, late spring day several years ago when I climbed over a split-rail cedar fence and made my way to the modest house where Joe Rance lay dying. Joe was my neighbor Judy's father, and she had asked me to come down and meet him. I knew only two things about him when I knocked on her door that day. I knew that when he was in his mid-70s, he had single-handedly hauled a number of cedar logs down a mountain, had cut and split them by hand, and then built the nearly half-mile-long fence that I had just climbed over. And I knew that he had been one of 9 young men from the state of Washington who shocked both the sports world and Adolf Hitler by winning a gold medal in rowing at the 1936 Olympics. When Judy opened the door and ushered me into her cozy living room, Joe was stretched out in a recliner with his feet up, all 6'3" of him. He had a thin white beard and his eyes were puffy. An oxygen tank stood nearby. Rain flecked a window that looked out into the wet woods, and a fire was popping and hissing in the wood stove. Judy introduced me, and Joe offered me an extraordinarily long, thin hand. We talked for a while. When the conversation began to turn to his own life, I leaned closer and I took out my notepad. I was surprised at first, and then astonished at what this man had endured and had overcome in his life. But it wasn't until he began to talk about his rowing career that he started, from time to cry. He talked about learning the art of rowing, about the sleek and delicate wooden boats known as shells, about tactics and techniques. He told stories about long, cold hours on the water under gray steel skies, about smashing victories, and about marching under Adolf Hitler's eyes into the Olympic Stadium in Berlin. But it was when he tried to talk about the boat that the tears really welled up in his bright eyes. At first, I didn't know what he meant by the boat. I thought he meant the Husky Clipper, the racing boat in which he had rowed his way to glory. Then I thought he meant his crewmates. Eventually, I realized that the boat was something more than just a shell or its crew. To Joe, it was something bigger than that, something mysterious and almost beyond definition. It was a shared experience, a golden moment long ago when he had been part of something much bigger than himself. Joe was crying, partly for the loss of that moment, but much more for the sheer beauty of it. I wanted to start with that passage because the book is about the long life of this man from his childhood, from all the hard things that he overcame and endured, and then all the really joyful and beautiful but hard things that he had to endure practicing for the Olympics. I would recommend this book to any Everett student because it's all about the character traits that we think are so important. It's mostly about grit and teamwork and how those two things can help you overcome almost anything in life. But it really is a beautiful story about a man who used those things not just to find something he loved, rowing, and people that he loved, his boat mates, but also finding beauty in the things that you love. Enjoy it.
The list.
Oh, thank you. I forgot. Thank you, Miss A. It is on the San Francisco Unified School District list. It is number 2. I'm going to show you right here. And this is the list that Miss A has in the library if you guys are looking for great book recommendations for the summer. Go find some.